Hi, this is Adrienne Prince with Team Gaia and Forbidden Knowledge TV. Join me this week for episode 2 of How to Awaken Your Divine Will and Save the Planet from Within. This week we're going to be discussing who are you, really? Today I'll show you around my garden and we're going to talk about who are you really? We've been getting a lot of rain in San Diego lately, and I just want to show you our luscious, beautiful garden. It's a little bit wild and a little bit tame at the same time. So we have all these beautiful trees here. We have a little oasis right in the middle of the city. And I promised I was going to show you around so you can get a little bit of nature time here. Of course, the Enchanted Garden is a way of just relating to the world too. So this looks like a pretty nice place to film. Maybe I'll stick here. What do you guys think? Is it nice? We're super lucky. All right, I'll see you in just a moment. Hi. Each of us have been born on purpose and with a special mission for healing the planet. If you ever wondered why you were born, here's your answer. The world that we live in is a shared art project, and each of us participates. I learned this when I was just 7 years old and found myself in an angel school during dream time. And they told me that every single person has access to creator abilities for making the world the most beautiful place it can be. And all we need to do is to step into that knowing and really start working with it to be able to get the planet out of the jam that we are in currently. Now, as every day goes by, we learn more and more about what our predicament truly is. And there's still a lot of heat online as to exactly where the origins were, who's participating, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. So I'm not really sure that we can get into that quite yet here. My job in this video series is to awaken in you your sense of divine will. Divine will is the core of you that knows what it knows, what it knows. And of course, the logical mind wants to put words and teams and schematics together to understand exactly who you are, where you came from, and all that. So today we're going to talk about who are you really, that you have the authority to have divine will. What's that all about? And how can this possibly work? If you've seen episode 1, you'll know that I've been on this journey of earth healing and earth creating since I was about 7 or 8 years old, and that was over 40 years ago. So I've suffered, as have many of us, many setbacks, self-doubts, changes of course, and I feel like finally I may have something to contribute to you that will make you stronger and make your life better, and also co-navigate us through the rocky patch that we're in right now as a planet. So our exercise for this is what I'll call the gathering breath. So as you bless and hold all the good that's around you and bring it in through your midline, this is how you can consolidate your sovereign creator abilities. We'll do it again. You gather with love and acceptance and blessing, and you bring that energy down through your midline to settle at your heart. Thank you. Okay, so why is it important to know who we are? Well, because in order to harness your divine will, you need to understand that you have divine origins. And this is not an ego thing. This is, ego is just one of the many layers of who you are. Who you are starts with your core frequency, that core flavor of you. And that is something that does not change between lifetimes. That stays consistent from lifetime to lifetime. You are you. You can become a more open or a more empowered version of you, but the flavor of you, the thing that people love about you, the thing that people recognize about you, never changes. It's you. And that means that wherever you travel in the cosmos, wherever you incarnate, you're still you. And you're still learning. And whatever that core part of you is, still remains. This puzzle of who are you really can really hang us up for years and years. Because on one level, you are the person on your birth certificate, or the person with the social security number, or the government ID number. If you thought that you're the person who was born in a certain year, went through a certain indoctrination process, had a certain career calling, then you are only scratching the tiny bit of the surface of who you really are. Who you really are includes who you may have been in past lives, and who you are in the dream worlds, throughout the cosmos, parallel lives, all of that. Those are all part of you. Basically, the way that I've been figuring this out, because remember, I've been taking this sort of like an exploration. Sometimes I've had guides, and sometimes I've just been exploring completely on my own. This is my little Jaguar exploring movements, you know, just kind of tracking what's going on and keeping my senses open. So for every dimension that exists, and there are many, there is a different you. But that core of you does not change. So in one dimension, for instance, I see myself as a heavenly daughter who came to Earth to prove my strength and to get involved in something that was really important that was going on. I wanted to show that I had substance and that I wanted to help. I knew all the angels were coming down to help at this time. And even though I was just a toddler, basically, I wanted to come in. And the court astrologers were most dismayed because I was supposed to be born about 20 years later, but there was somebody I didn't want to miss. I felt that for the tipping point, I needed to come in earlier. So I was born about 20 years before I should have been. And so my astrological chart was sort of thrown together at the last minute. And it's been problematic, but we've been working with it. And so that's the heavenly story of that you may also share, of who you were in the world above this world, who you were in the world where you decided that it was time to be born. And last week I was talking about how there are so many things that come along with being born in this earth environment. There's so many limitations and strange rules, and it's so different from the heavenly place we came from. And one of those tragic limitations that we have is that we cannot see ourselves as we are. I like to say that we are more than we know and less than we think. Our essence is so magnificent. Your essence is so magnificent. And while you're in this body, you will probably only get a glimpse of it from time to time, but it's true. And yet, at the same time, we're less than we think. You know, sometimes our egos will build us up to think that we're some hot shit. And you are, but not the way that the ego thinks. Then, of course, there's the who you were in other lives as you've been working towards this one and from this one. And of course, the singularity is always right here. And the you that you really are can exist without words, without descriptions, without modifiers. So although you may be a warrior in one dimension, king or queen in another dimension, a prince or princess, a scientist, a magician, there are so many things. In each dimension, your identity may be different, and they're all coexisting here. But what you can know for sure is that you are a child of the divine. You are part of the divine. You are a master within the divine, and you are also nothing. For alchemists, the nothingness aspect is actually the most powerful. There have been times that I have anchored a very powerful intention for the world, and the thing that made it actually work was that I came from a place of nothingness. And that's where divine will really lives. It lives within your core security to be everything, something, or even nothing. So your nothing place is actually your most powerful place because there are fewer attachments. It's a smaller molecule, you could say. So when it's sent with intention, it can go a lot further. So one of my most powerful demonstrations came when I found myself awaiting the birth of my child in 1989. I have a daughter who is quite an adult now, but in 1989 I was pregnant with her and waiting for the birth. I was living in a little cabin in the heartland of Texas, and this was a place where midwives lived, and they had hosted me to stay the last few weeks of my pregnancy, get comfortable, and get ready for the birth. So the birthing wasn't happening. First children are often a couple of weeks late, but every day I would get dressed wondering, is this the day I'm going to go into labor? Because I was definitely due. And I had just outrun Satanists the weeks before I had showed up to this place, and I'd love to tell you that story another time, how a precognitive dream saved me and my baby from being killed by a satanic coven when I was pregnant and on the road, in the next video perhaps. So while I was waiting for this baby to be born, I found myself in the presence of the Holy Spirit at 3 a.m. in my little cabin one night. And I had to talk with God. And God said, so what's keeping this child from being born? And I said, I don't know. Let me check. And as I scoped the planet, I saw that there was like a dimple, a space-time stuck piece right around the Berlin Wall. So without even thinking about it, from a place of total nothing, I pulled that out and flung it away. And then as I went to sleep, I said, people, don't fear your governments. You can take down and rearrange anything you want. And so it is. So I was from a very, very highest part of my being that I would call the divine will. But the most wonderful paradoxical part of it is that if you want to create big changes in the world, you need to be as small ego-wise as possible. If you want to create something great for yourself in the world, then you need your ego to be a little bit stronger and more developed. But if you want to work on the grid work, as many of you probably already know, it really pays to get as ego-free as possible. All I did from a state of will was simply remove a piece that was holding the energy hostage. So, here's the free flow of energy, and then there was a stuck thing. So the Berlin Wall at the time was the one piece that was keeping the entire Cold War in place. And when that piece was isolated and discarded, then the energy could move freely. And sure enough, within about 48 hours, the Berlin Wall was down. It had been such a profitable piece of equipment to load up the Cold War narrative and to keep the entire planet just terrified of being nuked at any moment. And suddenly, overnight, or during the course of one day, they say November 9th, 1989, during the course of that one day, it all came down. And my guide said, see, history can turn on a dime, and shift can happen overnight. All right, so all of the inklings and sacred feelings and tugs that you get as you explore information, as you read books or see films or get sudden flashes, all of them are true. And I spent a good decade trying to figure out, well, which layer is most true? Which is the one that is truly me? And I finally had to come to the conclusion that they are all. Once I learned about how dimensions work from studying the sacred geometry, I realized that they're all true at the same time. And whichever level you're living in at the moment is the one that's serving you or that you're learning through at this time. But it isn't the only story. And so you can be a reincarnation of somebody important, and you can be a heavenly warrior and a heavenly prince or princess. You are all of these things at the same time in different dimensions. So it's best not to necessarily attach our identity to any of those, because that's when we can run into trouble. So one of the biggest identities that has caused light workers the hardest misunderstandings is the role of Messiah. So you imagine, if you will, a heavenly being becomes incarnated because they want to help with this global idea of a planet that really works, a heaven on earth. And you are born into a culture that has a cultural story, and it also maybe has a religious story. So even while we have this cultural story that says that a Messiah is coming, if a child ever steps forward and says, I want to be that, or I might be that, the culture is very quick to say, no, that's not you, it's not you, you're not the one. And in fact, our entire culture is in this push-pull of wanting to encourage the flowering of our human consciousness and becoming all that we are, and suppressing it at the very same time. So for instance, when I was born into a Catholic household, because I'm Italian, I was told that God was in heaven, that you could say the Lord's Prayer and access God, that love was everywhere. But then when I went to my Italian grandmother's house, I had a bit of a fever and went to lay down in the bedroom. I saw the suffering Jesus on the cross, and the agony and the torment, and an evil force came out of that cross while I was laying in my fever on the bed. And I looked at the image of the suffering Christ, and I realized that for me, the visceral message was, this is what happens to troublemakers around here. Sort of like a message from the Romans, as if the Romans were still in charge. And so I realized that for one person to be the Messiah, they can be cut down easily. But for all of us to become part of the Messiah through the flowering of human consciousness, and after all, Jesus did say, all of this you shall do and more. So I realized that the only way that we could have a viable second coming, unless something else happens, but knowing that the Messiah in me and the Messiah in you and the Messiah in all of us has been suppressed. We need to be the Messiah together. And that's why I call it like the Messiah generation or the Messiah project. Because if one person embodies it, they can be cut down. But if all of us embody it, then we create heaven on earth. And that's where your divine will comes in. So when we master the anchoring of our firm intention for heaven on earth, and there's a dance between finding out what's really going on the planet and then anchoring the way that we want it. There's a dance, and there are two parts to it. You can't go without finding out what's really going on, and you can't go without embodying the solution. Both parts must happen. It's a process, and I know we're going to make it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this is helpful for you, and I love to hear from you, and see you again next week. Bye-bye.